Hey everyone, my name is Amanda Campbell, and today I get to share with you some information about the gray wolf and their presence within Yellowstone National Park. This presentation is for Eastern New Mexico University, English 1120, Composition 2 with Dr. Taiku. I'm a Montana resident, and as a Montana, we take great pride in Yellowstone National Park. And a big conversation up here is the gray wolves and whether their presence in Yellowstone is beneficial or if it's more problematic. And I am of the mindset that wolves are a keystone species and they function really well in the environment. However, not everybody feels this way. So, to kind of take you through all of it, I want to go back to the very beginning of the timeline and then we can walk forward together. So, in 1872, President Grant established that Yellowstone would be a national park with the intention of preserving nature, all of the phyla, protecting the animals. And so that was a big goal at that time. And a part of that thinking, I mean, if you'll indulge me for a second, close your eyes and imagine that you're a rancher back in like the early 1900s, like 1911. And you wake up one day to go about your daily duties and do your ranching business. And you go out, and once again, for like the third time this month, you find a dead calf. Well, as that's your way of putting a roof over your head and food on your table for your children, wolves are probably not your favorite thing because they're coming in and using your ranch as their own personal buffet. And on top of that, a lot of your own food you get from hunting. So it'd be kind of nice if elk had higher populations and deer were everywhere. If the wolves weren't getting in the way, you can find deer all day long. You wouldn't even really have to hunt. You just go out and get yourself a deer that night. So a lot of hunters, a lot of ranchers weren't fans of wolves. And because of that, and because the wolves were really just, along with impacting the locals, and they were cutting off populations in Yellowstone, the government felt that they were doing more harm than good. And so they started paying people in 1913 to come in and kill the wolves. And the wolves were gone, completely gone by 1940. So let's take a look at what happens when you take an apex predator completely out of the equation of an ecosystem. So, as one might guess, the prey animal populations skyrocketed. Wolves primarily preyed upon ungulates, so animals like bison, elk, deer, all of those were their main targets, and all of those animals are grazers. They feed on the grasses of Montana and Wyoming. So as their population skyrocketed, they surpassed carrying capacity to the point where the environment could not maintain itself with them around. They just ate the grass until it was nothing. There was nothing there. And it went from grasslands to wastelands. And the grass actually played a very important role. Their roots provided structural support to the soil. And when you took that structural support out of the equation, the soil could no longer support new saplings like aspen, willows, and spruce. And without the support of the grass roots and without the support of tree roots, the river started to disintegrate as well. So they just kind of chaotically eroded and diverted out, and it just wasn't very structured or effective. It wasn't very hospitable. And when you take out all those grasses, all the shrubs, all the trees, and you're impacting the waterways, you're impacting a lot of other species as well. Smaller animals, they don't have a place to go. Beavers, they don't have the waterways for their home, and they don't have the trees to build the dams. And the fish are quite reliant on dams because dams provide those nice deep pools of water where the water stays cool and they're protected from predation like aves. So their population suffered as well. So everything was just starting to face a decline. And it took a few years, but by 1995, we kind of started getting the hint that um, ungulate populations needed to sit underneath the carrying capacity for the sake of Yellowstone. So the big idea was to reintroduce the gray wolf. So they brought the gray wolf back, and within 15 years, Yellowstone restabilized. Um, and part of the reason why was, well, when a wolf is coming to hunt some, let's say, elk, um, there's two things that can happen. One, population control. The elk can die, it can be dinner. The second thing is the elk can move. So creating movement was a big deal for um, how the presence of the wolf really impacts the environment, because instead of a herd of elk just sitting in one spot all day long and eating and eating and eating and eating until there's absolutely no grass, wolf would come and then they'd move over here and they'd eat over here a little bit, and then the wolves, the pack would come, and then they'd move over here and they'd eat a little bit over there. And by doing that, the grass has an opportunity to maintain itself and regrow and reproduce and do what it needs to do to survive well. So all of a sudden we're getting our grasslands back. And we've kind of already discussed the trickle effect going down. So imagine the same thing coming back up. So once wolves were back to mediate, it brought the ungulate populations back within carrying capacity. It allowed the grasses to come back, restructuring the soil. The aspen, the spruce, the willows can take root. Now waterways have structure. Beavers can build dams. Fish populations can grow. And everything that feeds on the fish, like aves and hawks and bears, they have food to eat. So the presence of wolves had passively restored the ecosystem. And that just goes to show that every animal, everything has either a direct or an indirect impact on every other living thing within its ecosystem. And direct impact being like wolf to elk, where an indirect impact would be wolf to beaver. So here's some visuals to kind of just support the findings that have that we've seen since the reintroduction of the gray wolf into Yellowstone National Park. So you see here 1995, you give it a couple of years just for the grasses to come back and reintroduce that soil, the saplings to take root and to start growing, and for it to really start giving it time to make those impacts. After just a few years, beaver colonies are on the rise. And same thing in this visual. It's been just a few short years, and there is some shrubbery, there is some coverage, but I mean, it takes a little bit of time. But in about a decade, all of a sudden we have all of this canopy coverage, which is awesome for small animals. They need that in order to have a nice, hospitable habitat for them to live and enjoy in. This last visual is just a nice little visual of the trickle effect that's really easy to look at and just kind of understand. And so you see that there's these direct impacts between the wolf and the elk. And then you see the little bit of trickle effect that if you're impacting the elk, this is what else you're impacting. So just a nice visual. And then if you were ever curious about this. Here's some sources. That way you can do your own digging. But after doing my own digging and really getting to look at all of this evidence and the timeline, I feel very strongly that wolves are a keystone species and they're crucial to Yellowstone National Park and its health. So go wolves. And thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.